SaaS Backwards is sponsored by Austin Lawrence Group, specializing in demand gen for SaaS. It sure is noisy. I deleted 100 emails from vendors just this morning. Your buyer has gotten better at ignoring you, and you're gonna need a big idea if you want to cut through all that clutter. Austin Lawrence is just the right agency to help you find it. So if your campaigns are falling on deaf eyeballs, let's talk. Visit austinlawrence.com today and let's build something bigger.
Welcome to the SaaS Backwards podcast, where we reverse engineer the success of fast-growing SaaS firms and explore strategies CMOs and CEOs are using to drive their businesses forward.
Welcome to SaaS Backwards, a podcast that helps SaaS CMOs and CEOs to accelerate growth and enhance profitability. Our guest today is Susan Peich, Head of Marketing at Monitaur, an AI governance suite that delivers responsible and ethical model governance from policy to proof. Hey, Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yeah, really excited to dig in on what's become a very hot topic. And before we do so, could you just give us a little bit more about your background and your company?
Sure. So my name is Susan Peich, and I joined Monitaur in February after really searching throughout my career, looking for an opportunity to make a difference at the leadership that will be shaping and helping companies, work with AI in a responsible way. My background is in digital marketing, marketing ops, sales ops, and demand generation. And for the past 10 years, I have worked a lot with data. And you talk to any demand gen or digital marketing person, they're usually the front lines of data handling and what you can and can't do with it. So you learn a lot. You learn a lot in those roles. You learn a lot as you become a leader in some of these teams and have to report to the business. And so by extension of that, I knew that whenever I took on a marketing leadership position for a company, I wanted to find something that, let's say, if marketing went away, what would I still believe in? What would I still advocate for? What would I still stay engaged with long after that? And this is one of those areas, the responsible and ethical uses of data and artificial intelligence as our world is rapidly changing with technology.
Well, yeah, I mean, in just a few short months, this has become perhaps one of the most important things one could do in that realm, right? Is in terms of making responsible use of AI. It's just fabulous timing on your part.
Yeah. Well, and who could have thought? Because even when I was going through the search process and getting prepared for this role, it was mere months. It was mere 2 to 3 months from when ChatGPT was released. And AI became less of a IT data center technical word to everybody now touches AI. My brother can go and type in anything that he wants to do into a bot and, discover things that he's interested in. It's not just for work. So the barrier to entry on what AI is now is super low.
You're right about that ubiquity and the applicability. So I think they got to 1 million users faster than anything, right?
Yep.
I think faster than even Instagram did.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually tested it out with a possible trip to Greece. And I was able to make a very detailed 11-day itinerary with hotels and restaurants and cooking school recommendations and all kinds of things, having nothing to do with work, obviously. But I wanted to sort of test the breadth of applicability of ChatGPT beyond just the stuff we might do in content marketing, which is in itself pretty remarkable. Yeah. So I think it's no wonder Google and everybody else are chasing after this to try and stay relevant.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's backtrack just a little bit. So, you mentioned just as you landed, this tidal wave was coming up. And I'm just sort of curious, how did you get your bearings? What was your original, maybe it's a great question here. What was your original thought of onboarding yourself as a marketing leader? How did that look and how did that change?
Sure. One of the unique experiences that I had in joining Monitaur as a marketer and getting up to speed with what we're going to do to take the business to the next level was that the plan and the foresight that I had during the interview process changed immediately when I got here. and saw what was happening. It happened that fast. That was within weeks on, what we were seeing and what could be a possible plan versus what we got when we dug into the customer journey. And I worked with the leadership on, who do we have so far as customers? What are they seeing? Talking to them and hearing what they had to say to then say, okay, we need to change this because not only is what the customer's saying a pain point, but, here's what's coming down the line and the pains that they don't know they're going to have. And that happened within like the first 2 to 3 weeks.
So this was a case where when you arrived, things were like far more intense and good, really, in terms of the landscape of opportunity. We've had folks on who arrived and then COVID happened. And, if you were in the live event software space, as one of our guests was, well, that would be quite different kind of surprise. So what did you do to try and like widen the lens of the opportunity you might be going after together?
Yeah, some things were normal. Really just took in terms of onboarding, I'm used to being from past roles, I'm used to being marketer number 1 or number 2 into the organization that's either transforming or, building from scratch. And so one of the things that we had to do was really figure out like who all is involved in this market talking about what they're going to do about AI. Because if you look back, AI has been here for a while. You talk to data scientists, they're like, we've been talking about this for, almost 10 years, if not more, about the power of what models can do. And so, the urgency with ChatGPT just heightened. And with that, also the speed at which data could come in. So it was really then, we knew we had to talk to a lot more people in the organization. We had to figure out what they wanted to do, what they knew about it, and where they thought it was going to fit. So that was probably one of the most unique experiences to onboarding within a marketing program, is that even the companies were trying to figure themselves out all over again and what they're going to do.
It's very cool. And did you have like an agreed plan with your leadership team about what your onboarding was going to look like?
I did. So my CEO and I, we stuck with a 30-60-90. We're a small company. There's 14 people. So I really had to work on, everybody's involved in what I'm going to say within the company. They're going to help me out in some way because we only have each other. When you're that small, you only have each other to help out with what's going to need, what you can do with the manpower that you have. So, we made a conscious decision to assess the first 30 days, like what do we have? Is what we're seeing in the market actually what's happening with the teams that we've now said we need to get to these extra teams, and really just doing a solid job of talking to the customers again, and then spending like the next 30 days into the 60-day period going through, what do we have? What assets do we have? What do we need? What's not relevant anymore? And interestingly enough, what the company as a seed had already been saying that now people are hearing it. That's how fast things changed. Our product was right for, models have always been there. We've always had the ability to govern machine learning models, traditional models, AI models. Now it was a question of scale for all of these customers that need to facilitate AI governance.
So you're no longer screaming into the wind, as it were, right?
Yeah, that's the best analogy I can say. Like, it wasn't that, where people were thinking, yeah, but we have and you'll see this now. We have documentation. People have been trying to do the right things. They have documentation of what was going to their models. They have this, they have that, they have evidence, they have some assessment of risk. But to do it at the scale that now in numbers, every individual has access to train large language models in your company and outside of your company. How are you governing for how that's going to affect your products and your business? That is a much different question.
Yeah, and it's not just these large language models that we're talking about, right? There's plenty of other AIs in the workplace that need this attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, let's move on a little bit, because I think we should get into, what is the business problem? What are the ethics involved in AI more generally? I don't think anybody here in our audience is going to be expert, very few. But I think almost everyone in our audience is probably now wondering, how do they apply AI to their own SaaS? And we're beginning to see those things roll out. So maybe it would be good to set the table on what are the ethics around how we collect and use data with AI, and then we could talk about ChatGPT as well.
Cool. Yeah. To frame this conversation with ethics, that just implies the intrinsic behaviors of like people, individuals, and everybody in the organization. That implies that they understand the how of what's involved with handling data and collecting it and doing everything. And I'm sure just saying that, your comments would blow up and be like, no way. We've got some organizations, parts of the organization do, like say your sales and your master data management, your sales ops, your digital marketers who've had to do this for a long time. But would everybody that's able to touch, able to train a model or do it, understand the consequences of what they're putting in there? No, probably not. And those ethics are all the learned behaviors in your company. So if, let's say I'm a CEO right now and I'm sitting there, I'm questioning what these behaviors were before, say, ChatGPT came on and everybody could touch it, versus what they are now, where they are now, and what we're going to need to do to work well with technology like it. Data is handled by humans, systems are built by humans, and ultimately it's the humans, that will practice these behaviors, and they're also the evaluators of the output of ChatGPT and the generative AI that are going to say, yeah, that looks right. No, that doesn't look right. And that's where CEOs, they're rightly questioning, what AI investment is right for now with all of this technology. And then, understanding how that impacts their products, what their business's impact on society is going to be. And then don't forget the care of their own employees whose own data is being affected by this as well. So it's a big worry. It's a big responsibility.
So it sounds to me like this is almost a cultural issue, starting with the CEO. How are we going to respect our clients and prospects and employees? And through that establishing of how the relationships are going to be managed, then we can take a look at how are we going to use this new technology, which has new implications, but we've already had data privacy and data use implications, right?
Right. And so then that also brings up the question, like the same curiosity that has motivated everybody to try generative AI, try ChatGPT, look at the AI capabilities in these products. It's going to spur the same curiosity around these questions, not just at the C level, but, well, yeah, that was cool. I could do that. But, how did it do that? What is it using to do that? What is it? Those questions are going to go, they're going to start to permeate as people start seeing, you hate to say after the honeymoon is over, and wow, that was really cool, I could generate that. But what if it's not learning as fast as you thought? Or what if it's not like learning what you thought it was going to learn and is taking on something off goal or off business, or has a negative impact on your business? That's where the curiosity starts lending itself to what we were talking about earlier with governance, just that whole visibility and the whole chain of what led to your products.
Yeah, maybe it'd be good to back up just a bit and kind of define for people what governance means here. What are they seeking to control through this kind of software? What is the goal of the software itself? Yeah.
Specifically, our software, it's a piece that sits over model building and model operations. It's a part of that system that will actually help you collect the evidence of what fed a model, what happened at what time, was there action taken to remedy that, what were the remedies, and provide information in a way that other parts of the business can understand. So that could be your risk management teams, that could be your compliance teams, that could be your product teams, just something to bring visibility into, like, there is this generative thing that is producing something for your business.
So this would probably appeal a lot in cases where the companies are in moderately or highly regulated industries, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that was the genesis of the product that we have over 4 years ago. People were already working with machine learning, AI. Think about insurance and banks. They've been using models for decades to do stuff. And they do have to report on compliances to the regulatory bodies of their industries. So this is not new that they have to do it. The scale at which they have to do it now is critical.
Right. And it's perhaps less visible. It's a little hard to penetrate, right? So this is a new challenge in a known business area of endeavor.
Yep.
So CEOs should care about this because they already have this mandate, especially in a moderately or highly regulated environment. So healthcare, insurance, banking, financial services generally, maybe also government contracting, right? There's a lot of compliance in those areas. So they should care about it because with or without their knowledge, AI is going to be baked into their business process, if not their products, right?
Right. And yeah, their business process and their employees will be using it from another vendor. And, and it's right to want to advance your own products to meet new standards and new speeds of the world. So it's not a bad thing that companies want to take advantage of AI, but they do, again, need to take a look at using it responsibly and also thinking about a new education of the employee or employees and partners that are going to be contributing to those products and those outcomes at the company.
Really interesting. So we're talking about really putting up guardrails in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is any part of that establishing of those guardrails, is that something that lay people can understand? Is the establishment of these regimens, visible, transparent as a process?
It depends on who you're talking to. We see, again, insurance and regulated industries, the understanding is already there that there are consequences to, either unethical or undocumented or unprovable use of a model to determine something for a customer that impacts a consumer in a negative, in any way. I think the other motivations for doing this, I was kind of joking with a former colleague the other day, like, when you look at what's happening, and I'm going to frame this in that when you look at what's happening with ChatGPT and everybody jumping on board, you can almost, depending on who you talk to, you can see what stage of grief they're in. Because remember, like the stages of grief also like align to like a big life event that has changed. And you could pretty much call what happened with the release of ChatGPT like a big corporate bang, right? So depending on who you're talking to, everybody's in a different stage of grief at this time. Like some are in denial, some jumped straight to acceptance and ran with it and, or backtracking. But most importantly, I think it's going through the process is where we're going to find the new motivations. As we mentioned earlier, for companies, like it may not be a regulation, but it may be a better product can come when you can get this kind of visibility and have the visibility to manipulate what you need to manipulate to make something better, or do something that's going to, understand the ROI of like, I'm using generative AI and I'm making this really cool product, but how do I know if these costs are actually worth it for what I'm trying to generate? So it's going through those stages and realizing what you're going to do, where people are going to step back and they're going to say, oh, wait, am I just excited? Or, am I really producing something that is still going to be business viable? And all importantly, another note that's going to motivate people is the whole discussion coming up on IP. We've heard a lot about who owns the IP of the thing. Did you make it, or did the bot just generate it? In the loosest sense possible. If you don't have visibility, you don't know.
Yeah. And with recording artists and visual artists saying, hey, you can see my work, or you can hear my voice, or you can hear my copyrighted sheet music in the product, right?
Right. So we'll say, you probably have that sense as well. We're definitely going through a process as businesses, as people, with trying to understand. And to be honest, there's also, for as much as we say, like, I come to work and all anybody can talk about is ChatGPT, or anybody in your LinkedIn feed might be saying that, when you step out or you go somewhere else, or you're like, volunteering at a daughter's track meet, there are people who still have no idea what you're talking about. So you have to be realistic about the fact that this may consume us, but it is not the case that everybody knows what is happening to them.
And that's really clear, right? There's a cognoscenti at the moment that are tuned in to the power of this to transform business. And then there's 300 million Americans or more who haven't really paid much attention. So
right.
Still very early days, lots of opportunity.
Yep, for sure.
So is it harder for firms like yours to help with compliance on things as big as a large language model? I mean, are these harder to supervise, or is it the input and output that we supervise and it's not so hard?
A little more in the latter. It's definitely more about the input and output that we supervise to see to generate that report or that evidence that you need to report. And remember, with compliance too, you're reporting to show that you're doing the best that you can. Like, you are paying attention and you're doing it. There are going to be things that come out that aren't compliant. There are going to be things that happen that show risk, but The good of that is that you're at least taking a look at it and monitoring it, and you're showing, you have evidence that you know what's going on. And if something catastrophic would have happened, you can go back in, you are able to go and pinpoint where that happens.
Got it. It's not getting your process and software around the ChatGPT or other LLM. It's the behavior of our people who are piloting it or the systems we integrate it with.
Exactly. It's really just another part of knowing the ecosystem of your larger data picture that's generating your products.
We talked a little bit about like the cognoscenti. And my question is, even within that group of us, are there differences, with the age of executives and how they perceive these tools? I mean, my sense is that someone in their 20s or 30s is going to kind of jump at this and feel great about it, whereas maybe people my age or a little older are more skeptical.
It's an interesting question. I've seen it. I haven't dug into it very far, but let's take the example of what was released today and like break it down that way. So Snapchat had been testing for paid users an AI bot that would, auto snap, or, you snap a picture, it gives you back a response, or you can ask it a question, which as the mom of a teenager petrifies me because already social media was already a bucket where like Gen Z, I'm going to pick on Gen Z because my daughter's Gen Z and is a teenager. Like, she doesn't have the same questions that I have. Like, oh, they just added this thing that can talk back to me. They don't question it. So this generation grew up with everything in their face, real time. You can take the devices away or not, but everybody knows what's going on. And, some digital medium is communicating with them, and it is algorithm driven, even down to their Spotify. Taylor's algo is better than, I don't know, someone else's. But my point is, like, they're already talking in a language that we're questioning.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this idea of, it's the algorithm, it depends on how online you are, right? So I play online poker, and me and my friends kid around. We have a private game that's facilitated by, an online poker system. And we kid around that the algorithm is actually controlling our experience, because it doesn't feel like live poker.
Right.
The odds are different. The game is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the comfort factor, knowing that your experience is driven by an algorithm, probably is different depending on how truly digitally native you live, right? So,
Right.
So maybe it's not an age thing, it's an engagement thing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's mostly an engagement thing. And then just to extrapolate that back to business, I do think, given that scenario, we are going to see different trains of thought in leadership on companies that are led. Maybe you can make the inference, younger executives might not go after all of the consequences and understand those first before they're starting to build a product. You may have older executives, more experience might hinder or...
We've all met cowboys, right?
Yeah.
There are definitely cowboys, especially in startup land.
Yep. And so I think generation definitely has a difference in how they view the technology, for sure. But I really do think the motivators are really going to be like, if my business is about efficiency and making money and, making a product that people love, how do I know that I'm doing that and making a profit? That's when the other parts of visibility will start coming in.
So in your conversations and your company's conversations with prospects, how do you convince people this is a must-have? I think that's like our big issue, right, as marketers, especially in the cases where we're changing the status quo, which hopefully most of us are trying to do. How do we make this kind of proposition a must-have rather than a nice-to-have?
Yeah. So one of the things that we find every day with prospects, the good news is, obviously, when they're reaching out to us, they already want to do that. They already have some motivation internally. Like, I think something we can relate to is whenever sales and marketing was starting to become, account-based marketing was coming in. Sales and marketing was to stop being silos and coming into, there's not this reluctance coming in on the calls that there was at that time, for sure, which is interesting, right? Because when we talk to them, it's not just the person who's raising their hand to learn more about the platform. It's, well, this part of the business wants the data that I have, or they want to see this, but I don't know how to provide it. And they're actually getting a little more support from their stakeholders. Like, somebody solve this. because everybody wants to use an AI product, or they're being sold an AI product that they want integrated into their stack, or they themselves are making the AI that's going to go into somebody else's stack. So it's not been a question of convincing them. It's been a question of like showing them like you can actually start doing this now to provide that visibility and start building your practices at the same time, without having it to be, on scratch paper, and, and be responsible right out of the gate.
Right. So they're looking for a solution, or they're very open to it at the least.
Yeah, there's pressure internally to have that same, because especially they're used to being, whether it's a data engineer or a data scientist or whoever's touching data, they're used to being able to say, well, yeah, this is the source of that, or I can trace that, or I can track that. But when it comes to something like this, and they feel like their legs have been cut out from under them, they're like, oh, I used to be able to do this, but I can't anymore. Help.
Well, that's a great place to be as a marketer when people are crying out for help. So,
yep.
Again, great timing for you in joining this firm. So here's my favorite question I ask of marketing leaders at the end of every podcast. So what would you do differently looking back on recent decisions as a marketing leader? So either in your work or career, what would you do different and why?
Ooh, and we aren't allowed to default and say all of them. I laugh, but that's something that I constantly find myself going back to, is that there is always a different way to do something. So what you find yourself learning is like, oh man, if I had this technology 5 years ago, this program, we conceived this program and it would have taken off a lot faster than we had the right idea at the right time, but wish we had this technology to execute it. And I think it's just that it's the experimentation that makes me think wow, marketers are lucky to be able to, work with a lot of people, work with a lot of data, and work with a lot of behaviors, and bringing those all together to, have that experience, have that constant drip of experience on yep, that'll work in this, understanding space and time and saying, yeah, I can pull those tactics together. No, that's not going to work in this scenario, and coming up with something else that will work pretty quick. So I know that gets around I know that goes a little bit around it, but I don't have a regret, but I do have memories of oh man, if I would have had this at that time, then this would have taken off,
Well, so the regret sounds like a time machine, lack of a time machine.
Yeah.
Right? I think we all would relate to that. So Susan Peich, I want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. If people want to connect with you or learn more about your company, how can they do that?
If you want to learn more about the company, please come to www.monitaur.ai. And I am also on LinkedIn as Susan Peich.
Terrific. And I'm on LinkedIn /in/Ken Lempit. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, please do so wherever podcasts are distributed. Susan, thanks so much for a discussion that's highly topical and timely. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the SaaS Backwards podcast, brought to you by Austin Lawrence Group. We're a growth marketing agency that helps SaaS firms reduce churn, accelerate sales, and generate demand. Learn more about us at www.austinlawrence.com. You can email Ken Lempit at kl@austinlawrence.com about any SaaS marketing or customer retention subject. We hope you'll subscribe, and thanks again for listening.